Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran trying to explain to younger people that South by Southwest used to be a festival where musicians were cooler than software developers, or else a scrappy upstart, explaining to your extended family that losing only $5,000 playing South by Southwest is a bargain for the exposure, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the fourth Friday of September 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made. And it would always be some guy named Manuel who drove a Subaru Impreza with a vanity license plate that said stained, and who's always trying to sell you nicotine gum that he claimed contained THC. And old Manuel would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on my YouTube channel for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a little community over there, including many people who are listeners of this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. Head over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. If you're not in a position to support the show in that way, I totally get it. You could still help us out in a couple of ways that are entirely free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. It was a pleasure to talk to Lissie this week. I've known her music for a very long time, and it was really nice to hear about her very interesting and long journey so far. I hope you enjoy our chat. Our guest this week originally hails from Iowa, but rose to national prominence as a singer and songwriter after moving to Los Angeles in her early 20s. Lissie is the stage name of Elizabeth Morris, an artist who has gained a richly deserved international following for her eclectic pop, folk, and rock signature sound. While attending university in Colorado, she collaborated with the artist DJ Harry on a song that was licensed extensively for television on House, The OC, Veronica Mars. Another song she co-wrote was later remixed by Deadmau5 and went on to win a Grammy. She's recorded for Cooking Vinyl, Fat Possum, and Columbia Records. She's toured with Lenny Kravitz, Joshua Radin, and Lana Del Rey. She's appeared at Bonnaroo, Glastonbury, and Austin City Limits. Rolling Stone has called her as earnest as they come, and NME says that she has quietly become one of the most vital vocalists around. Lissie has a new album out this month entitled Carving Canyons, and I got a chance to catch up with her on the phone last week and hear about her journey so far. Lissie, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. You grew up in the Quad Cities, which, as much as I love the Quad Cities, it isn't known as like a mecca or a bastion of thriving music in the United States. It's not the first place that you would think of. How were your musical tastes formed growing up? What was the music there that was available to you?
Yeah, so I did. I grew up in Rock Island, Illinois. That's like right on the Mississippi across from Iowa. And I actually am now living back in Iowa, the last 6 or 7 years. My parents and like their college friends, I just kind of remember whenever they would like get together and have fun, they'd like throw on like the Big Chill soundtrack, Motown, any kind of sort of like the Beatles or even the Beach Boys. So I kind of had that, like, not very present, but like in the background. I feel like there was always music around. My brothers are like 9 and 12 years older than me. So there, like MTV was always on, my brother's favorite band's Depeche Mode. So I had like kind of a lot of music around me. But then additionally, my grandfather, rather, my dad's father, he was a barbershop quartet, like international champion. And so he was also a choir teacher and would do like a lot of local like musicals in the theater. So I kind of had that kind of performance aspect and then like singing in church around, and like my brother played the piano. So yeah, long story short, like, music was around me and I just was like singing all the time from like a teeny tiny age. So
you definitely expect it for the barbershop quartet, world-class winner to be from the Quad Cities. I will say that. That tracks. And I've read a bit that you did get a start some as a kid in musical theater and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah. It's funny. We sort of joke to this day because my grandpa and his second wife, they would like be in our house, like rehearsing routines. Like, I can do anything better than you can, like in the living room. And we'd go see them like perform. And so my sister and I both were like, oh, we want to get on stage. And so from a young age, did like these group sort of classes where we'd have recitals. And I ended up doing a lot of like local musical theater. So when I was 9, I was Annie. And it was a dinner theater. So it was like, professional. And I was a kid. So it was like a big responsibility to be like kind of treated as an adult. And I did 82 shows and I took it very seriously.
That's very serious. That's not, rehearse for 2 months at your high school and then, do it Thursday, Friday, Saturday and call it good.
Yeah, no, it was like, up till 10 or 11 every night, getting up and going to 4th grade. Wednesdays, getting to miss school for the matinee performance. So I think that sort of from an early age solidified like my love of not only performing, but just like being given, like have people having faith in me to like, show up and be prepared. And, like that, I really liked that kind of responsibility as well. So, yeah.
It's pretty unusual for a kid of that age. I mean, all kids are kind of interested in maybe being on stage and taking their star turn for a second, but to actually follow through and do I'm an adult and I don't want to do 82 shows of
Me
something. You know what I
neither.
mean?
I know. I
So
don't know how I did it, but yeah, no, I feel you on that.
where do you think that came from? Like that ability to, that kind of stick-to-itiveness?
Well, I'm the youngest of four kids, and I think, and we all have very like strong kind of skill sets and personalities, and we're always like, all of us are very like task oriented, and our parents were always like super loving and supportive, but also like achievement was like acknowledged. So
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, like with the singing and having this big loud voice, it was also my way being like the little baby in the family of like, everyone listen to me, I have something to say. And so I think when I realized I was starting to be heard and seen, and like my voice mattered, just within even just the dynamic of where I grew up, which was like kind of a pretty traditional Midwestern place, like, that opportunity allowed me to be like, I have a voice, and I get to take up space. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that, that kind of gratification of that feeling, early on, was like kind of drove me to just love it. I love to get up, and there was no microphones or anything, just this old theater. And I just let her rip, and was like, tomorrow. And it was just like, I would get chills. Like, I loved it. I love to sing for people and have it be received. And yeah.
That's that's a beautiful thing. When did you start to have the inkling that, like, you know what, this is something that I actually want to do? I mean, plenty of people participate in music and theater when they're kids, and people are trying different things. But when did you kind of start to notice, like, I might be different, I might want to keep doing this?
Well, I think I spent a lot of time like alone when I was young. Like, I played alone a lot, and I would like go into the woods and like hang out in like the slide at the park, which now that sounds like dangerous, but
Yeah.
in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, it was perfectly acceptable. So I think I was always dreaming in my head of like scenarios, and making up songs, and probably also like watching MTV, and, performing in my basement, like to the camcorder. Like I was such a
Yeah.
ham then. I'm not now so much. Like, I'm a little more like, oh, don't look at me now. But back then I liked it. And so I think when I was like in high school, going kind of back to my point about growing up in sort of a traditional Midwestern town, like sports and grades and clubs. And, I was really trying to be like that, you know, normal teenager. But then, like, my junior year of high school, I just got real emo. And like, I got mono between my sophomore and junior year, and it like totally changed my personality. It's super strange, like how viruses can do
Yeah.
that. I don't know, but I got really like quiet, and kind of like emo, and like cut off all my blonde hair, and like, like cut my hair really short, and, just like kind of had this time of rebellion. Started playing guitar and working at a coffee shop that had open mics. And so
Yeah.
I started, I was feeling so many things, and I was just really kind of grappling with like a lot. And so I was using writing songs and being able to perform at the open mic as like this sort of means of processing and sort of coping with being a teenager. And so it was around, like when I was in high school writing songs, I just was like, this is what I want to do. And I know most people think that that's not a realistic career path, but
And they're pretty much right. I mean, for the most
yeah,
part.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even my dad, he's like, you gotta go to college and like work hard. My mom was always just, I mean, she would tell me that ever since I was a little kid, when I sang, my eyes just lit up
Mm-hmm.
in a way that they didn't do in any other context. And
Yeah.
so I think having the support of family, and but yeah, there's definitely a lot of like people who well intended were like kind of doubtful, but I just kind of, got out of high school, went to college for a little bit. I just was like, open mic, who can I open for? Like writing
Yeah.
songs, like collaborating with DJs, like who wants me to sing? Like, I just was really all about it. Until then I dropped out of college, and, the
Yeah.
kind of maybe I saw in a movie somewhere, like move to LA and get a record deal. And and I did. And it
Yeah.
was like, I was so delusional that it actually worked out.
That's a trip. And first of all, I do want it to go remarked upon that your like memoir one day should definitely be called "Mono Made Me Emo."
Yes, I love that.
But so you, I don't want to get too far ahead here because this is the part in many artists' life that I'm so interested in, which is when I mean, complete obscurity. You're living in the Quad City. It's not like you grew up in L.A. and your dad was an entertainment lawyer and there was a couple numbers for you to call when you were, 18 years old and you were kind of into this. You're in the Quad Cities. Then you don't exactly go to, you didn't go to Nashville or L.A. or New York. After that, you end up in Colorado for a little while. So what were you learning in Colorado and how did you get from where you started from to where you eventually landed in L.A. with a record deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was, I think when I was younger, I was like a lot more fearless. And like, again, I like wasn't afraid to take up space. I think like now I'm a little more like, oh, sorry, I don't know. But back then
Totally.
I was like, everybody look at me. So I was in Colorado and I mean, I had a fake ID. Like I was studying journalism, but not really, I was going to class and like I loved sociology and I loved geology. Like I like to learn. So it wasn't like college was a waste, but it wasn't like I knew what I wanted to be. So, it was good that I was in college in Colorado State in Fort Collins, which is an awesome music
Yeah.
town, really like seeing a lot of like jam bands and, going to Denver and going to Boulder and going to the mountains. And so I was just like surrounded by music and was just like kind of fearless and having fun and would just like go up to people and be like, can I play? Can I sing? Like, do you want me to open? And I started getting to open for people like I Bet You Love and Special Sauce. I was like, can I play a song for you? And they
Yeah.
were like, wow, you're great. And they sort of tried to help me out at one point in like 2001. And this promoter in Fort Collins, like, Ozo Motley came through and I got to open, which is like not even music genre related, but it
Totally.
was like I was getting $50 to play when all these artists would come through at the Aggie in Fort Collins. And yeah, so then I was kind of discovered by this DJ named DJ Harry, who was, I don't know if you're familiar with String Cheese Incident,
Yeah.
but they had a label in Boulder called Sci Fidelity. And so DJ Harry was kind of known for doing these string cheese remixes that were like really cool. And kind of like, I think his girlfriend saw me singing and then introduced me to him, and he was looking for female vocalists for this like original album he was making. So I ended up going to Denver or to Boulder and like meeting his team, which is funny, is like people I run into now in like totally different companies and career places. But 18, 19, singing on this DJ Harry song, which got radio play and was like getting synced in TV shows and stuff. And I was actually starting to make a little money off of the fact that I'd, written and co-written and sang on this song. And so that was like
What did that feel like to go from, making $50 and begging people to open shows to getting a little bit of mailbox money?
Yeah, I mean, there was a placement in like the OC and like Veronica Mars and and then I went and did a semester in Paris, and it was sort of during that time I was overseas that I was also like playing, going anywhere. I didn't barely spoke the language, but just was like really out there, like I want to sing, like who wants me to sing you a song? And so sort of between, the confidence boosting of like I can like make it in a foreign city alone, and also like this song that I wrote and sang on is actually like out there and it's making money, it made me feel like, hey, this isn't that unrealistic, maybe. And it was also proof potentially to, my family that then when I decided to move to LA, actually my dog Byron, who I no longer have, but like my first big, like, couple $1,000 sync check, I went and I bought a dog. Which you should rescue dogs. I wasn't even going to get a dog, but I was at the Beverly Center and I saw this puppy in the window, and it was like, this place is probably like really creepy and evil, but I saw this dog, Byron, and I was like, that's my dog. And so I actually used like my first like music check to like buy a dog. And he went on to be like the love of my life. Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, I think just kind of having like, hey, I made a little bit of money off of music. Like I can do this. And yeah, so it made me feel confident.
There is something about that proof of concept, right? Like before it happens, you don't know. You're like, well, maybe I'm not one of those people that does that. But when it actually happens, even if it's a bit or even if it's just dipping your toe, there is a little bit of like, well, I did it once. Why can't I do it again?
Yeah, and I think it was, if I had been older at the time, I don't think that I almost think that it was like a blessing that I was from Rock Island, Illinois, and not from like a city because I wasn't savvy and I didn't really know anything. And so I was sort of just operating off of these like kind of delusional, romantic, and somewhat privileged. Like I didn't grow up like rich, but I definitely grew up where I had like a support system so that if I were to fail, like there would be arms to catch me, which I think is important too. Not everyone can just say like I'm going to do all of these things, and
Sure.
like I definitely had support from my family system. But yeah, so it was just kind of like this kind of just weird confidence that I admire my younger self for just being so certain that I knew I was going to be able to do this thing.
I know. There's kind of like the in awe of having like the confidence to do it, and then also in awe of just like the sheer amount of day to day energy it takes at that point in your life to just meet people, go out, figure it out, play any gig. Like that is a completely frenetic time in life for young artists.
Yeah, and I think, it wasn't like my guitar playing was great or that my songwriting was even great, but I think my voice was always like just big, and it like whether people liked it or not, you'd hear it. Like I had friends who would be like, you could be in a bar like talking to someone in a loud room and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, we can always find you. Like you're the frequency of your voice, like it just slices through stuff. And but like that's not good when I'm on an airplane and I want to have a conversation with my seatmate, because I
Sure.
do have a voice that carries. So I think there was something with like, even at the time, it was just like kind of my voice would slice through things for good or for bad, and so I was able to kind of catch people's attention.
Yeah.
And so that was really like reassuring. Like, okay, like I've gotten enough positive feedback that I don't know. So
And at that point, once you get to LA, and I might be skipping a step or two here, but I first became aware of your music years ago when you did that EP with that Bill Reynolds produced, which I still
yeah,
still love. I think it's a great record, and it seems like at that point, it seems like you had like a very busy kind of roller coaster half decade to 7 years. Like things just kind of went. Can you kind of speak of what it was like when you start getting, the project itself called quote unquote Lissie, like when that kind of starts to take off, what did that feel like and what was making that record like?
yeah. And I do want to say I remember I think it was 2010 being at South by Southwest, which was like this total whirlwind, and your name was plastered everywhere that year. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing Joe Pug like everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And were you ever, sorry, I digress, but were you
You
kind of like in the hotel cafe scene to a
No,
degree, really?
no.
Or,
I came through, so I was in Chicago, but when I would come through Los Angeles to play, I played Hotel Cafe enough times to learn that you had to bribe the door guy to get them to say that you made it. What was the deal? Like you had to have at least 25 people pay or you got paid nothing, right?
yeah. And I don't even know that I remember that. I just knew it seemed like it was like a tight crew. And if you could
Yeah.
kind of like even barely kind of like, the first time we got to play there, it was like, whoa, this is a big thing. Yeah.
I don't know if you ever did this, but it was there and it was Joe's Pub in New York where like if you're a certain age and you kind of had a cup of coffee with the music business, you would be sent to these places where like you'd go and play your set and there would just be like 40 lawyers watching you in the crowd. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? Like
No,
I don't even know
absolutely.
I don't even know if this happens anymore, but I do remember one of those was at Hotel Cafe and one of them was at Joe's Pub in New York, which is a trip.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the thing is like I think it was like, John Mayer had been playing at Hotel Cafe and like Sarah Bareilles. And it was sort of this like kind of vehicle for people to kind of be like, the managers and producers. And yeah, like the industry would come out and
Yeah.
showcases and all that, which, yeah, now I guess it's like TikTok. I don't know, but
I think that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
really, like, it kind of, I mean, man, it makes me feel old to be like, in my day, we had to actually go into a room. Now people can just, look at your follower count or whatever. But
Yeah, no, it's definitely changed. And I comment on that to kind of answer your question. Like, I do feel fortunate that when I was sort of coming up, it was still the industry had changed quite a bit, but at least like there was more of a framework in which you do this, this, and this, you get discovered in some way. So like I was kind of seen in LA and had this production deal, which led to a record deal that then fell through. But then through that, I met my manager and I had an attorney. And then I got my manager took me, Peter Leak, who's been my manager for like 15 years now. He took me over to the UK in 2007, signed with Columbia UK, Sony subsidiary, and then they funded not only making that first record, Catching a Tiger, which I made in Nashville in 2009, but then when it came out in 2010, primarily like really in the UK, and then it did quite well in Norway and was going to like Germany and Western Europe. It was really because I had this deal that I could keep my band on retainer,
yeah.
that I could tour, that I could buy flights and pay my band and, go and like, kind of not even pay my dues. Cause it was like, I could go and I could like tour the world to sort of continue to try to like amass like a following, but it was really on like the label's dime. So, I mean, if I had to do it all now, I don't know if I would be as savvy to like, how do I finance this? Yeah. So I was fortunate to have that, major label support, which then led to, 2010, like whirlwind, like played Glastonbury. I was on Jules Holland. Like my album was at least top 20 then. My albums now in the last like decade have always been somewhere in the UK chart, at least. I'm not as popular in the US. I was always kind of indie here, but kind of overseas was like kind of like best song of the iTunes song of the year, or, like I had all these accolades in 2010, like coming at me. And so I was like, again, like, even though I lived in LA, still kind of just like a deer in headlights, like, what is this? What is going on? Like, I don't know. Just tell me where to go. Like, and my band and I just loved it. It was so fun.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. Lissie had to make her own way from Iowa to the center of the music business in Los Angeles. There was no guide holding her hand and clearing the path in front of her. And it sounds like she did it through a profound sense of intuition that was informed by the artists whom she loved from afar and tried to emulate. And that reminds me of a wonderful poem by Richard Speaks that intimates this sense of sort of ridiculous but absolutely necessary mimicry that we all do in the artistic world. It's entitled Patsy Cline. Much of what moves us is wrong. Our hearts the fools of ancient orders, dressed hilariously in case nothing else is funny. Otherwise, we're Lear, but with less impressive credentials. And of the madness our choices offer, it seems petty, deserving less nature's full-throated storm that says of Lear's woes, goddamn right, deserving more the weather at the mall, a drone, and a light that takes Valium religiously. What we have left in us of nature and a discord that is the storm's right mingling summation in a clipped flash of light, it's a woman, a man. And if the heart too thoroughly adores its own kitsch grandeur, like an overdone theater, gaudy and gimmicky in its yearnings for an audience, still, its dramas are elegant. From the chair on stage, a man simply rises as it dawns on him, as they say, a phrase that suggests we are planets rolling in and out of light, not our own small selves when we suddenly see it, what was right there all along, like a force we would ignore. She doesn't love him, that's all, and planets fall into the sun. Much as we move through air, we look past the tinsel's rapture for a post, the clumsy hope that velvet will make a bench seem posh, our rabble, even our minds all hushed. We watch people we could be, will be, were, and we are moved. How did you handle that personally? Because people don't, when stuff comes at you like that really fast, and you're relatively young, you're still in your 20s at that point, were you able to handle it okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think I handled it well. I think I was like pretty tired a lot, but I was 26, 27. So I was kind of able to not sleep and like show up and sing. And no, I loved it. And I think I handled it well. If anything, I think because I just was like so naive to everything, I probably at times came across as like not having like enough reverence for things because I don't know quite how to explain that as I reflect. Like there were a lot of situations where it's like I didn't really know like who anyone was or like what the thing I was doing was because it was all so fast paced that then like as the years passed, like I don't know if people thought I was snotty or something because I like didn't remember stuff or I don't know, like I don't think I've ever known to have like the appropriate reverence for different facets of my industry. And so I don't know that that's always like, it's not like deliberate or like, it's just me being kind of like, I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so I think I handled it well. I mean, it was sort of like, as long as my voice would work, I was game for anything. I would lose my voice a lot, as you probably know as a singer. If you try to do too much, so not being able to sleep enough was definitely hard on my voice, but I think I handled it really well. But I also think I didn't maybe at the time know too, that sort of attention maybe wouldn't last forever in the same amount of intensity because you can kind of only be like a new artist once. So
yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I do think that careers can kind of have like these waveform kind of things where it's not that you just go up once when you're a new artist and then it just slowly goes down, but it is like a waveform type of deal. I've heard Neil Young talk about this before, and you got to kind of get used to, you got to be comfortable with the ups and the downs, or otherwise you're going to have to go find a different line of work real quick.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I don't think about it a ton now, but in reflecting on it with you, like, I had all of these opportunities and festivals and there were all these things happening for me. And it was really exciting. And I think I navigated it well, but, I wasn't, I had contemporaries that were sort of friends that, went on to become huge pop stars and I think there was like, I probably had like a little bitter year where I felt a little bit like jealous or bitter or,
sure,
just in being completely transparent. And that was sort of then the journey to me to where I am now. I live in Iowa and I'm, I like to not like really worrying too much about the result or like how other people react to me, and to just be consistent and authentic, because it's like a long game that I'm playing, you know? And so it sort of, maybe there was like a year of like adjusting to like the industry that was like kind of hard on my self-esteem. But then from there, I just was like, I moved to Ojai, California. I lived there for 7 years, and made some records, bought this farm in Iowa. And so consistently now, with being in the industry, my reaction to like the ever changing industry, how people are seeing you and hearing you, how many comments you get and shit. Like, it's sort of like any artist, you kind of do that arc you talk about. You kind of just have to make peace with yourself and have like a more well-rounded life than just being like, how many hits did I get? How many plays, or I don't know. Like, I had to move past all that shit a long time ago.
So many people, though, especially once they've tasted some of the higher echelons of success in music, are unable to have that perspective. They're unable to say, well, maybe I should have a well-rounded life instead of monitoring the Spotify plays every day. So what do you think it was about your character, your upbringing? What do you think it was that allowed you to make that pivot? And in what ways has moving back to Iowa allowed you to do that?
Well, I mean, I think if anything, and putting out this new record and starting to talk to people again after, 4 years since my last record, and then also COVID, I've been pretty isolated. And I think like, I don't know, I think I maybe sort of, I don't know if it has to do with being from the Midwest, but like kind of when you're from the Midwest, and maybe why I used to get in trouble, like I got kicked out of high school and would rub some people the wrong way, is because I think that I kind of, coming out of age, like was like, I want to be seen, but then as time has passed, it's sort of like, I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing. I think you're not supposed to think too highly of yourself, And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
you're kind of supposed to be one of many, like, which I'm still not quite, but I think as I've like aged and matured and have more wisdom and life experience, like, kind of like the one of many thing, or like the don't like think too highly of yourself, basically. I think that it's been interesting to me now that I'm putting a new record out to like kind of be reminded of like, oh yeah, like people know who I am, people know my music, like I get to like hang out in their living rooms with them when they're like crying over a breakup or getting married, or and it kind of all rushed back like the honor of my music getting to be this good part of people's lives, which is like really for me the amazing thing. But all of the like hype and all the other hoopla, like I don't know, I guess maybe it's self-protective mechanism, but I can't really be too bothered about all of that.
You're kind of really starting to embody and live out what I've always thought is the dream career, which is Tom Waits, who you don't really know anything about his personal life because he is just kind of off doing his own thing. And then every once in a while just drops an awesome album that everyone loves and everyone appreciates him for the next 3 years, until the next one comes out. And I just always thought he did it exactly right. I mean, what you're describing, what you're doing right there, I think it's brilliant. I've spent enough time in the Midwest. I lived there for a while where I know what you mean about that Midwestern attitude. The best I've heard it described is Midwesterners, if they get a compliment on something that they're wearing, they can't just take the compliment. They have to then tell you like what a deal they got on it.
Yeah, totally. I find myself doing that all the time. And it's like, I can tell when I'm like, around like LA people or, fancy people, like, I don't know, not fancy people, because I've got plenty of friends that are cool. But I'm like, God, why do I do that? Like, what's the deal? I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny. You're also kind of living in a space now that kind of comports with the more modern music industry. Like we were saying before, I don't think, 10 or 15 years ago when you were getting started, when I was getting started, it would have worked to not go to a population center. You had to go to the hotel cafes of the world. You had to go to the Joe's Pubs of the world. But now I'm starting to meet younger people who will even come, they'll like open a show or something like that. And I'll be like, how'd you end up here? What are you up to? And they'll be like, well, I put out a record in college by myself and it got, 750,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. But then here's the rub. And this is what's really funny. I'd be like, well, what did you do next? And they're like, Well, I signed with a record label, and now nothing has changed except they just take all my money.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So,
I know.
but you're coming from a totally different perspective where you went in, you worked with this apparatus, you have set up a career, a name, for lack of a better word, a brand that people and listeners know. But now you're able to kind of recede into a place where you can just kind of like a turtle poke your head up above the ground for people to see you for a bit and then come back down when you're ready to work on music or just live a personal life. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. And, I think even post COVID and like with remote studios and Zoom, I mean, it's like that. I think, like you said, it used to be you had to go to LA, you had to go to New York. Yeah. And now Nashville is always been a big country place, but now that's becoming a real hub. And I mean, I think still it's good to put in your time in those places and meet cool people and inspiring people and collaborate and be in the mix and stuff. But I see more and more people like wanting to like not have to live in a metropolis and like, or living closer to family or having quality of life that comes from, getting to go grab your groceries and go to the post office and in like 10 minutes, or like, just like easy, everything not being so expensive and like busy and loud and,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm not trying to paint some like idyllic, like I'm so like, I've got it all figured out. Cause I definitely have my dark nights of the soul of like, I very well could have become irrelevant and it's possible that in some ways I am, or I don't know. And it's then I just have to tell myself like, are you happy? Does it matter?
Yeah.
And I have a dog and I live on a farm and
Yeah.
I have a lot of responsibilities here. I started a popcorn company,
Right on.
and opened a store. And I like, I'm creative and I don't want to solely be defined by how people respond to my musical creativity. I like a project. I mean, I even just love to clean my kitchen. I'm like a
Yeah.
doer. And so I always sort of say to my management, like with anything I do musical, even it's like, I'm cautiously optimistic. I have no expectation, and things I've done have worked, and things I've done haven't translated. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you kind of find that space where you like are just prolific and consistent, and just eventually something's gonna click or something's gonna
Yes.
and but I used to worry a lot more about like the outcome, but
Yeah.
maybe just through life experiences, like personal life experiences, like loss and heartache and grief, and just becoming more, as you become an adult, you encounter more humbling things, and you just kind of have to, through that, find like your coping mechanism for being a human. So
Well, not
that's
to
what I'm
mention,
working on.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention though, you move back to a place where you have genuine community and actual family ties. My wife and I did the same thing 5 or 6 years ago. Moved back to Maryland, where we're both from, and I
Okay. Yeah. I
find,
was going to say, where you're in Maryland then?
yeah, we're right
Okay.
outside of D.C., and this is where my wife and I both grew up. And I
Nice.
find it's very similar. You're right. Some things work, some things don't work, but I do trip a lot less on the things that don't work. Living around community and family, because I can't be focused on career stuff all the time, and you just end up with other stuff that means so much more. It's like, well, I bumped into my sister at the grocery store. You know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
talk for an hour, have a cup of coffee, or I watch her daughter for a little bit, or it it I don't know what I'm trying to get at here, but I identify very strongly with what you're saying. Like it does no good to have a 1 or 2 dimensional life that just revolves around art. You kind of fold in on yourself in your own little personal hell the moment that you start to do that.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way of putting it. Because, I had a great community of musicians and, friends when I was in LA in particular. And then, I have my bandmates when I'm on tour. But there was something about being around my industry all the time, or having to talk about what I was up to, or what
Yeah.
tours I was doing, or what deal I'd gotten, or how my album was doing, or what was I working on. And that I didn't really want to be around like people who were doing the same thing as me. And so, not because I didn't like them or because I wouldn't again, but I just, part of what I've loved about, you mentioned like community, but also, where I live, there's like a lot of like, seed saving and like farming and people that like graze with goats. Like I have goats here right now, like grazing in my woodlands to get all the invasive stuff out. And like I moved here and started meeting people that they were like my rock star. Like I was like, oh my God, that's that person. They started Seed Savers. Like I want to be
Yeah.
friends with them. They know so much about plants and like, I
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so it was like suddenly I had this not only friend group, but like intergenerational friend group. Like girlfriend in my 20s and one in her 30s and one in her 50s and one in, like 70s. Like I suddenly had like this intergenerational group of friends who were, not at all related to my world, but like I respected so much what they do and they're so curious about what I do. And so that's been kind of cool. Like, you know, I'm kind of going off topic, but I think like as an artist, like, I definitely want to figure out how to like make enough money to have like freedom. I mean, I don't want to be dictated by financial fear, but I also want to provide for myself enough, like not lavishly, so that I don't have to like create something just to create revenue.
Yeah.
Um, but I oh shoot, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh no, I was going to say is that I think that this idea that like all the musicians have to go live with each other
Yeah.
in big cities is weird. Back in the day, like didn't every town have like its troubadour? I don't know. Like,
It's barbershop
why
quartet
do we?
singer. Yeah.
Yeah, why do we think that we can't like live amongst all the other people? Like, like, and I remember being younger when I moved to LA, how like if you didn't live in a city, people were kind of like snotty about it,
Yeah.
and like, oh, you live in whatever, blah, blah, blah. But now it's almost like post COVID, now it's like hip to like move to a small town. And so now, like when
Right.
I tell people I'm from Iowa, they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Whereas, however many years ago I'd say I live in Iowa and people would be like, gross, like that sounds terrible. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's really rude. And like,
Yeah.
joke's on you because you're
It,
paying $6,000 to live in a studio and I live on a 45-acre farm.
right.
So
Right. No, but
don't be a snob,
there
you
is
know?
a certain level. There is something to that, like the idea that every town would have a troubadour. I remember when I toured with Steve Earle years ago, he would tell me like, man, anytime I worry about money, I just think about the subway in New York City. And if I went down to the subway in New York City, I could make like $400 in like 2 hours. You know what I mean? Even if he was nobody,
Yes.
was his point. And I have the same feeling where I get bummed out about music and I'm like, oh man, I should get my electrician certificate and just move on. This is fucking stupid. But then I'll be on tour, I'll be on the road, and I'll drive through, 6 small towns. And in every one of those small towns, I think to myself, there's a bar in here, and I could put 150 people in that bar on a Friday night, and I could make what I needed for a month. You know what I mean? Like, the industry is not as narrow as it can sometimes seem on Instagram. It really isn't. Like, they need to hear music in a bar on a Friday night. They need to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, there's ego involved in that too, though, because, like I'll play something in Iowa. And because now people know me and I'm not like Lissie, like they might not even come. They might be busy that night or,
Yes.
and so I may be playing a solo acoustic and like 40 people show up and they're talking.
Yeah.
And then I can go, but then I can go to like,
Right.
the UK and play to like, 2,000 people or, whatever it is. But I think that's good for me because it
Yes.
keeps me from thinking I'm too hot, that I'm like too hot of shit. Although then my booking agent would probably say like, well, you don't want to like devalue your market value. Essentially, you have to like kind of be careful to
Yes.
not make yourself too available.
100%.
But somewhere in that is the mix of like being able to not like take yourself so seriously. And I think especially like during COVID, I did these distanced outdoor shows, just a few of them. I mean, and it was like so clear to me how important music and gathering is. Like everyone was like holding back tears. I was like crying on my first song because I'm like, this feels so good. Like
Yeah.
I needed this. And like it was like this moment, there was like 50 people outside, like all behind their masks, like welling up. But it's like, I believe like the path to peace is like giving people tools to feel their emotions so they don't bottle them up and explode them out on everyone else. And I think music, it's like a service. It's like let me help you feel what you can't identify in your soul so that you can like process it and grow instead of like being like super repressed and like going and like cutting someone off of traffic or,
Right,
like
right.
I think
Best
there's
case.
such a service to helping people feel. And that's what we do. So
It is what we do, and then we can also experience it ourselves. Obviously, we can't get it from our own music, but like I can provide that for other people, and then I have to go listen to an Elliott Smith record or the band or a Lucinda Williams record to get that myself. We all need that sustenance, even the people that make it themselves.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think now more than ever, like I think a lot of artists, I'm curious how you felt like the first like 6 months of the podcast, the first 6 months of of COVID, of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, what a heavy, sad, scary time. And just seeing, being sensitive as I'm sure you are, like just seeing and feeling other people's pain as well as my own. And it was curious, like, well, what's gonna artistically, like, what'll eventually come from this? Because, like, I mean, I didn't even try to write a song for
No.
a good 6 months. Like, how do you process this? How do you explain any of this? And I'd even gone through a breakup, and it was like, I don't even know how to explain that. Like,
Yeah.
so did you write a lot during COVID, or did you kind of give it a
No,
rest?
I was changing diapers all of COVID
Okay.
because my wife was
Are your
working
kids tiny?
yeah 3 under 5
Oh,
and
wow.
so
3 under 5. Good
yeah
Lord. That's a lot.
yeah so my wife was working and I was just holding down the fort, but no, I know what you mean. Like it was, you can be sensitive to what was going on in the world. I also feel like particularly in our little corner of the world in entertainment and music and the arts, like there was just a lot of excess, death, overdose, stuff like a lot of people I've known for a long time just,
Oh, gosh.
didn't make it through or came close to not making it through. And you kind of get a glimpse of what had been going on under the surface the whole time. And this blip of COVID comes and it exposes what they've been feeling for a long time. And that's a sad thing,
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear. It sounds like you lost some friends, and it's no, I don't, not without going into it too much, but I mean, there was a moment for me coming back. I came back to the farm in May of 2020, and it was just me and my dog, and we were pretty isolated. And my boyfriend had like suddenly broken up with me to go date his like coworker, and it was like very shocking and like betrayal.
Great.
And
Yeah.
so it was a lot. And everything that was happening up in the Twin Cities with George Floyd. I'm pretty close to Minneapolis and all my friends that live there, and obviously politics were crazy, and it was just like the world felt like, oh my God, there's so much pain. So and I couldn't escape myself. I couldn't go on tour. I couldn't move. I couldn't go on vacation. I couldn't even like go hug my parents.
Right.
It was like, so I think I was definitely like, I had a little stretch where I'm like, I don't know if gonna get through this, and I think I managed to through like very intense self-care. But yeah, I mean, I think there were people that were just like, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. It's definitely like a very trying time that I think we're all still like collectively traumatized by. So
yeah, it really does. And I don't mean to minimize the Great Depression. This is the first time I've ever said a sentence like that. I don't mean to minimize the Great Depression here, but I do remember, my grandfather, God rest his soul, like he was really stamped by all of his decisions were kind of informed by having gone through the Great Depression. And, I don't know that it's that degree. I think the Great Depression was obviously like had a lot worse impacts on people, you could probably argue. But my point is, I think all of us who are adults at this time, like we're going to be stamped by what happened during those 2 years. Like there's no doubt about it.
yeah. And I mean, I just think of my nieces and nephews and like what their experience is like. I feel like young people are more cynical than I think like we were when we were young. And yeah, there's just so many ways I think it's going to continue to like inform us all moving forward. Yeah. And it like feels kind of like, okay, we're through the weeds, and hopefully that's true. And
yeah,
kind of getting ready to go on tour and being like, I don't know if my body can take it. Like I've been on a 2-year break. So
well,
like,
yeah,
that's
I feel that. Well, listen, before we go, I was about to call it there, but talk to me a bit about this new record that you have coming out. It's the first one in 4 years, so it's a bit of a hiatus. Would the hiatus have been that long anyway, or, but for COVID, that's what happened?
Yeah, so long story short, I have a new album coming out September 16th. It's called Carving Canyons. It's my first album since like March of 2018. Without COVID, it probably would have happened more quickly for sure. But also like the years of 2018, 19 into 20, I was just touring a lot. I was kind of reissuing and covering and doing a lot of like content that wasn't brand new songs or a brand new album. So it probably would have come about more quickly otherwise, but it was like November of 2020 when I really started actually writing songs just about like the breakup and the world and my life. And so this new album, I mean, it really has, I think, because I wrote and recorded over the course of a year versus like writing a bunch and then going and making an album. It did it in like stages.
Yes.
When I could like pop over to LA with my mask on,
Right.
And so I really feel like I'm especially proud of this album and the freedom of being independent, that I can make it that way, that, it's like I'm angry, I'm sad, and then it's like I'm self-aware, and then I'm accepting, and then I'm hopeful again, and being able to sort of travel that kind of arc of like grief and kind of coming through something and not like trying to go around it or over it or under it, like just having to go through it, feeling it and releasing it, So that's basically Carving Canyons. It's like when we look back on our lives, we'll see, there are peaks and valleys and this beautiful sunset over like this intricate canyon that our life has carved because of all of our, rich kind of the rich pageant of life, like goods and bads. Yeah.
Some days you have mono, some days you have emo. You know what I mean? It's really downs and ups.
Well, I had COVID for the second time in June. I didn't get very sick. But I do think it made me stupid for like a while. Like I think this virus thing, like, I was like depressed for months. Yeah. And so with COVID, I'm like, I was sleeping like 12 hours a night for about 2 months. Like, so I do wonder even with that, like I feel like my brain was swollen for a while and I couldn't wordle. And I was like, I used to be able to wordle and I can't wordle anymore. So.
Oh man. No, I believe you. I got it real bad in May. And I was never, I was never a denier, but I was also a person who was just like, it's a serious thing. You're probably going to look out for it. But I'm in my 30s. I don't smoke. I don't have a lot of comorbidities. I'll probably be all right. And then I got it. And it just like, man, it messed me up for like weeks. It was not great. So
well, so I hope everyone's staying healthy and well out there, taking care of themselves. So
good luck with the release of this new record, especially good luck with the touring behind it. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Such a pleasure. When I'm in DC, if I know you've got 3 under 5, which sounds like a lot, but I'm going to be in DC. So if you ever wanted to come out to a show, you're more than welcome. So I
sure will. We'll use that as a date night. Well, that's a great excuse to not have to watch my kids.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, that's in like November. So maybe we'll see you then.
Okay. Sounds great.
Great
Peace.
Talking to you, Joe. Thank you.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Lissie's latest album is entitled Carving Canyons, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.